there are hard cases that we want to deal with, we want to try to address, we think are important, but we're nowhere near being able to frame a strategy. And I don't want to wait until we can. So we start making grants, and we're sort of, remember that strategy landscape I described before? Well, we may perpetually be in the discover or develop, never get to a strategy. I'll give you two examples. One of them is doing something about the functioning of the American democratic political system. It is, a few years ago, I decided this was going to be an area of work for us. And that we have to do something. The Republic is not, I mean, proposition. The government doesn't function as well as it could. Who would argue with it? I mean, nobody's arguing that. I mean, if you get a little bit more intellectual, you said, okay, the whole structure of government, as we read in the Federalist Papers, this division of powers, the separation of powers, all this stuff is designed, right, to stop the government from doing too much too quickly and hurting minorities. It's one of the things it's designed to do. Well, it brilliantly functioned to stop it from doing stuff too quickly. And stop it from doing stuff in the best interest of the people, unfortunately, as well. You have, in the United States, a politics that does not sync with the requirements of the structure of the government. Compromise is not valued, it's deplored. So it's very hard to get what one needs. And then there are a lot of pieces to this. And when we looked at the pieces and where we might work, we said, okay, let's start at, I think in terms of continuums, let's start at one end of this continuum, the voter. What do we know about the voter? The voter is not necessarily in the United States of America as sophisticated as appreciating the subtleties of some of the complex issues that make up public policy. In fact, when you look at the polls about what Americans believe, a European friend of mine said, you guys have looked at the age of reason, decided you didn't like it, and are going back. I mean, this is the polity is not, I would say, adequately educated in civics. It is certainly doesn't have the critical thinking abilities that you would want the polity to have to deal with public policy issues. And because of that, partly because of that, it creates an opportunity for the media to behave the way it does, particularly in campaigns. Why do you have 15-second ads? I mean, look at what 82% of the billions that was spent, what did it go for? Over 80% of it went for those short TV ads. Why did they do that? They did it because it works. Why does it work? The electorate. So if you're going to fix this system, long term, you really want a K-12 system in the United States, a public education system, that is better than the one you now have. I typically say that Chicago has the worst large public school system in America. Almost always someone says, no, mine's worse. Okay, I don't want to fight over that, but ours is really hurting, and I know of what I speak, because we have an education. So, you move right along, we work in other areas as well that we care a lot about. Elections, per se. We think we'd like the electorate, the eligible electorate, to vote. We'd like to make it easier. Right now it's very hard. It could be made easier. It really could. We'd like those voters to vote, or we'd like to get them educated, so that's a good thing. And we'd like the election. We'd like the elections not to be managed by people with money and run by people with money. We'd like to come as close to reforming the electoral system as possible so it isn't driven by the money that's put into it now. We would like a media that does things that are accurate, that are balanced, and that really does serve to inform the electorate. So we're moving along in this continuum. We would like to have primaries that don't lead to polarization. We would like to do something about the gerrymandering and the redistricting, so that that does not contribute to that as well. We all the way up to what happens in Washington. We would like to have a social political setting in which members of different parties can actually come together and not fear that they will not get the nomination in the primary the next time around because they spend too much time talking to somebody from another party. So there's a lot of things, and that I've just mentioned a few of them. In this area, we have no strategy for this. We are working all along this continuum right now, and we have been for the last couple of years, probably spent $15–20 million on this, and we will continue to do that. And so are a number of other foundations. I would not call it strategic philanthropy. Another example, another hard case, the education thing. Before I came to the foundation, MacArthur spent a ton of money, that's a technical phrase, on I would say, traditional education reform, public education reform. By traditional, it was like the movie that some of you here may love, which I didn't love, was Waiting for Superman. That for me, it had a blinding insight that students, kids, and their parents would prefer good teachers to bad ones. Who knew? So we discovered that too after some bazillion dollars spent in various ways. We found out that principals could be important. I mean principals, like school principals. And we found out teachers could be important. And the more you had of the good teachers, the better off you were. And the more you had of good principals, the better off you were. There was no suggestion about how you'd get more. Just better ones were better than those who weren't so good. Absolutely wonderful. I'm so glad we did that work. So we got out of that field pretty quickly. By the time I got there, they were gone. We weren't in education because we had nothing to say about education except what everybody knew and didn't know how to fix. Then we did some upstream, what I would call upstream research. Again, before I got there, I'm not taking credit for any of this. On what was happening in the media and in information technology and how that was impacting kids. This was John C. Brown, who thinks and was on the board, provoked a lot of this. And what happened was work that was initially in digital media began to drift over to the way young people were learning. And they were learning differently now than they had before. And the blinding insight was maybe this could be useful. And this evolved into our area of work, which we call digital media and learning, which essentially recognizes that you get the most robust learning when you get kids to, it's like a Venn diagram, to work on stuff they're interested in themselves, work on stuff that their peer groups are interested in, and the third thing is that their teachers and their parents are interested in, which is academics. If you can get in that sweet spot there, you can do more with kids. And this is, and the most interesting thing is always kids who come from challenged backgrounds rather than from those that don't. You can accomplish a lot. And so this work has led to changes in the curriculum. And so the curriculums, if in our schools, and we actually opened a school in charter school in Chicago ourselves. We've got a little operational here. We have another one in New York, and we're spreading this around. There are a couple of elements to this. One is this connected learning that I've described, and the curriculum is largely systems-oriented rather than discipline-oriented. There's lots of digital media involved, gaming, both to individualize the learning to the kid's pace, but also to integrate evaluation and assessment of performance as part of the game, the way it happens in games. And kids are latching on to that, and it seems to be working. Two other elements that are really kind of interesting and frankly just fun. One is called the Hive, and that is trying to connect schools with those cultural institutions of the city. And we have a well-developed Hive in Chicago that has the Shed Aquarium, and it has the Planetarium, and the Field Museum, and the Shakespeare Theater, a whole bunch of them connected in digitally and through electronic media to the schools, and gets the kids involved with these cultural institutions. We have a hive in New York. We are going to move to 2 other cities. Pittsburgh is just beginning, and then after that will be San Francisco. The hive is turning out to be interesting. Only doable, frankly, because at this scale, because of digital media. And the last one is this space in Chicago. We've called it the U Media Center, and it's part of what was a stock room in a library. So we've done this in a number of cities too, taken large spaces in libraries and put in a lot of different kinds of digital media, put in mentors in there, and then opened it to all the kids who are in the public school system over a certain age, 7th grade or 8th grade, and have them, and the whole idea is to have them create in this space, to do stuff they wouldn't otherwise do. Anyway, I will tell you, I give you a little texture here because I'm trying to persuade you of 2 things. One is it's interesting, it's exciting, it may work, but it's not strategic. We're reaching around here. That's what we're doing. We may, in retrospect, make it strategic someday. The next President MacArthur will tell you about the strategy of digital learning, but I couldn't possibly say this is strategic. That we're exploring right now. The 4th area, non-strategic, is an area that we've just instituted in the last year. I have 1 year of it. It's called Discovery Grants. This was partly sociological for me. In a foundation, you can, it seems to me, I won't say that it's other foundations, maybe it's just ours, but a caste system being developed of people who do the line function of the organization, the program officers, the program managers, the vice president for programs. That's what the foundation exists to do. Right? The rest of us, the general counsel's office, the people who do investments and manage the money, people who do the budgeting, everybody else, we're staff. Okay? We're in support of those people, the line function. And so for a lot of people, particularly in the administrative part of my 170 so person organization, feel like second-class citizens, they've told me. Anonymous. So I wanted to make everybody who wanted to be a program officer have the opportunity to be a program officer. So I created something called Discovery Grants. And who comes to a Discovery Grant meeting? Anybody who wants to, self-identifying. At what level? At any level. So I do have the person who works in the mailroom, and I do have vice presidents who come. Not more than 15 or 18 people actually self-identify, thank God. And not less than 10 or 12. So we're in that kind of zone. And we get ideas from the staff itself of what we might want to fund, and we also aggressively go to places that believe they are the source of ideas. So you know who these people, the MIT Media Lab, the Wisconsin Project, Santa Fe Institute, I mean, you go TED Talks. So we cover all these things, and we try to get ideas. Plus, we just kind of listen. And you can throw it over the transom at us, you know, whatever you want. And we have some screening that goes on, and those who want to go to the meeting, it's like a graduate seminar, should have done the reading before you get there. You should read a big, thick packet of grant proposals, and then we sit and we talk about it. The only rule we have is that the proposal will not be considered if it is in a current area of work of the foundation. So that if you want to make a proposal in the current area of work, make it to the vice president and the program officer. So it has now. Are we looking for other things too? Yeah, we're looking for things that look smart, look interesting, exciting, might be scalable, the usual kind of stuff, but nothing particular. So, and we vote around the table, and we vote. So when I told a board member that we're doing this, she said, "So did you ever bring one?" I said, yes, I brought one. It was a very interesting thing. It came out of a guy who fixed a bicycle for us up in Connecticut, a series of bicycles. He was connected to a green project at UConn, and they together put in a very creative proposal for us to fund that would have an impact on their biodiversity program at the University of Connecticut. She said, "Was it funded?" I said, "No, it was voted down, so it wasn't funded." So I maintained my credibility, but I did not get my proposal approved. So this is another area, I would say, non-strategic, but interesting. it occurs to me that when we talk about strategic philanthropy, we talk about theory of change. We, at the same time, are talking about leverage almost all the time. There are a couple of words I want to use here: leverage, risk, and a couple others. It is common for in the world of philanthropy, in the sector, for us to be looking for leverage, to be, in other words, getting more out than we put in. We're always looking for where the leverage would come from. One of my vice presidents instructed me early on that we don't do soup kitchens. We don't do direct service delivery. There's no leverage there. You're absolutely certain, if you're into assessment and evaluation, you can be sure, if you're doing a soup kitchen, that you can say you fed a certain number of people by the end of the day. But not much systemic change. So we generally don't do direct service. We don't do soup kitchens. We look for leverage. I would say the most highly leveraged strategy we have right now as a portion of our conservation sustainable development strategy, which is a pretty big and complicated strategy where we're seeking to achieve biodiversity, protect biodiversity, not only in hotspots, which was the way we initially began and became famous over the decade of the 2000s, but now in large areas, watershed areas. And the only way we really can succeed over time, we think, is by having an impact on what China does. Not only China, but if you don't get China, if you don't do something about the way China goes about extracting resources in particularly Latin America and Africa, not only, but particularly Latin America and Africa, both marine and terrestrial, you're not going to win this one. But if you were my board when I was making this case, you would be looking at me as you are looking at me now and saying, and you are going to change the way China behaves? Which is what they said. And I said, I don't know. We're working on this bit of leverage. I just can't imagine having the concern we have without trying to do something about this. I had this one little vignette. I was in Madagascar, and I was on the NGO we were supporting was showing us a village where they had worked, and they had been teaching the people in the village to do various things so that their fishing would be sustainable. You know, like don't make the holes in your net too small. You want bigger fish, so little things like this. And I was getting in the moment with the native population, the indigenous population, with the NGOs that we were funding, and with my own program people. So three kinds of people. I'm watching the interactions between, and over their shoulders, I see this enormous ship going by on the horizon, and it's a Chinese vessel, you know, sucking up every living thing. So what are we doing with little holes in nets if we don't do something about that? Or, you know, we're looking about the way logging is accomplished, and if you don't change the way that's accomplished, what you're doing in those forests isn't clear to me in terms of long-term impact. So we look for leverage. We don't always achieve it. We are famous for our failures as well as our successes. I love we had this great. I remember when they proposed that, they brought the grants to me. It was to do something about aquarium fishes. Apparently, a lot of people in the developed world, in the United States, have aquariums, and they get these. Maybe people in this room, and they get these little fish, and they're very expensive. And apparently, the people who get the fish destroy reefs in the process, and therefore the ecosystem. So the idea here, to get leverage here, was to go and create a legitimate, certified method of getting the fish which would not destroy the reef. and you'd have a chain of custody, so you'd offer it to the person who had the aquarium certified fish that was certified sustainably caught. Would cost more, but you as an aquarium owner would be happy to do that. It turned out, after we did our little assessment, after a year, that the chain of custody was very, very difficult to establish with these little fish. And the aquarium owner was a cheapskate and didn't want to pay the extra money. So it didn't work out at all. But sometimes it does. Juvenile justice reform. This is one of the great stories we have in the foundation. We're in this area. This happened before I got there. And we sponsored research on the adolescent brain. And it turns out the adolescent brain, who knew, is different than the adult brain. And that turned out to be the basis, I'm going to make this plain now, you can check me on it, for 3 Supreme Court decisions which separated the way in which adolescents are treated from the way in which adults are treated. So that we could, and we, you know, I didn't know anything about what happens in jails for juveniles and prisons for juveniles. I do now, having been in 5 or 6 of them and spent days there. None of it is good, essentially. But back that up a little bit, it is better than it would otherwise be had those decisions not been made, which are the basis for a shift in the center of gravity from the kinds of punishments that were given out to adolescents were utterly inappropriate, where rehabilitation was still quite possible. So we think lots of lives were changed by that research, by the leverage we got.